My, my name is Anne Moriah, a transformation strategist and coach with over 25 years experience, coming alongside leaders and entrepreneurs to navigate transitions with clarity, confidence, and courage. Whether it's launching, growing, or exiting a lifestyle business, my work is all about adding value so people build fulfilling lives and businesses. Today, I'm excited to welcome a truly exceptional guest to our conversation. Grace Adelakun is a highly accomplished people and culture strategist with over 15 years experience in HR. She has worked at senior level with organizations, various sectors, including the BBC, Tony Blair Institute for Global Change, and the World Wide Web Foundation. Beyond her leadership, her HR leadership, Grace is also an accredited executive coach, partnering with C-suite and senior leaders to drive growth and transformation within their organizations. As the founder and director of Nava Grace Consulting, she is dedicated to shaping workplace culture that empowers individuals and organizations to thrive. Grace, it's a pleasure to have you here today. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Anne. It's an absolute pleasure to join you and join everyone on this call. Thank you for having me.
Super. So we'll just get right into it. And I'd just love to hear your views. You know, traditional outplacement programs focus on job placement, but entrepreneurship is rarely presented as an option when we look at redundancy. And I'm curious, from your experience, why is this the case? And how can organizations expand their approach or this approach to redundancy?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And traditional outplacement is normally another service that an employer would engage with to support their staff if they are going through redundancy. So, they tend to come in at the just before an employee might leave an organization, and that's really to support to get them ready for that next move. And the thing with outplacement, I see it as a bit of a life ring, right? It's a life ring that's chucked out to kind of help people navigate uncharted waters. So if you are going through a really difficult process, your outplacement support is to help you ready you for that next step. What it typically doesn't do is prepare you for what would be, your startup coaching if you are looking to start a new business. And I think because the entrepreneurial mindset or being an entrepreneur carries a number of risks, an outplacement support service is looking how you come out of a really tricky situation and steady you into hopefully a new pathway that kind of provides a bit of security. And so moving someone from something that is a risk to potentially something else that is also uncertain and a risk isn't really the kind of name of the game with regards to outplacement. That said, I am seeing a lot more organizations in that outplacement space that are helping people think about, a career in consulting, working and setting up as a sole trader. But that sort of startup capability or what you need to do to run your own business is probably still emerging because there are several risks attached to being called an entrepreneur as well. So I think that's one of the things. In terms of the approach, I think it's organizations can expand their approach to redundancy, but typically redundancy is the last resort, right? So if you're going through a particular piece of change, redundancy is, what an organization would try and avoid at all costs. So I think rather than expand that approach, I think there's an invitation for organizations to consider how they can support their employees beyond that process. Like, so from the very start, how are they thinking about their careers and having a sense of ownership of their own career? And that doesn't have to kick in when there's a change program happening or we might lose people. Actually, it's how throughout the life cycle you can really empower people to think of themselves as the seniors of their career, the CEOs of their career, if you like, and really be empowered to take ownership. So I think it's beyond just the end.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really good. And as you spoke about risk, I just thought that currently, I think being in a job is quite a risk because you don't know when the rug's going to be pulled off from under you. And as I think of that, because where entrepreneurship has traditionally been viewed as a very risky space to move into, you don't have job security in this season, if I could call it that.
Yeah.
What can HR and people and culture professionals, as well as business leaders, do to proactively support employees who would be exploring entrepreneurship, whether it's through policies or programs or just mindset shifts, even within the organization?
Yeah. Again, I think some of this is really, it is really around mindset shift and, an entrepreneurial spirit mindset. A lot of us do a number of things in the workplace that you would consider an entrepreneurial. So, the ability to course correct. You might be on a project, you might be working with a really tricky stakeholder, and you are taking the ownership to use that problem and spinning that into an opportunity for yourself or for your team if you are a leader. And that is very much an entrepreneurial skill set. So your ability to navigate grey and tricky waters, like that again is an entrepreneurial skill set. And I think there is something about how people and culture leaders, business leaders as a whole are encouraging that. So you're recognizing that mindset, you're celebrating it, your peers are celebrating the fact that you've maybe taken a risk and it's resulted in some sort of impact. It's more about how we're celebrating that within the culture. And so I think there is something around business leaders, people and culture leaders celebrating that entrepreneurial mindset, creating cultures that can foster that and facilitate that, and celebrating when those skills do show up. I think there's also something around, when we are looking at talent, you might, as a leader, have someone who is incredible, they're outstanding in what they do, rather than just thinking about, okay, how do I keep them for as long as I can, thinking about their career beyond yourself. And so I think there's something around, to really encourage that entrepreneurial culture, thinking about how talent can move beyond just a role. Your career isn't as linear. I think a number of us, know and hear the phrasing about your career being like that climbing wall, that lattice, as squiggling careers. There's a number of names for it. But there is something about us as leaders really thinking about our teams beyond just their roles and how we can encourage them to have a fluency about their skill, talking about their work in a way that isn't just about their role, but them owning their career. So I think there's a number of things we can do, and there's subtle shifts which I think on the when then amalgamated becomes quite a substantial move in the dial of a culture becoming really entrepreneurial and people willing to take risks. So
yeah. And I think that pretty much speaks to the whole concept of entrepreneurship, where you see every talent as an entrepreneur and then all coming together within an organization in their own right. As I listen to you, yes, I hear the bit about the subtle changes, but I think there is this big, huge shift that still needs to happen within organizations where leaders don't look at, the way for a long time it's been, when people come in, we want them to stay forever, though that's not even realistic. And we're spending money on them. And so we have to get a return on our investment, which is granted. But where do you sort of hold the space between the two thoughts that the organization needs a return on investment for this person that they've hired? They need to also make sure that that person feels valued beyond just employee to, hey, in your own right, you're an entrepreneur with this expertise that you bring. How do you hold the tension between those two?
Yeah, it's difficult, but I think if we are to be, as I'm speaking to leaders here, if you are to be a leader and really think about your people, and I come at this from a people and culture lens, right? You're going to think about how you're going to keep people. The best thing you can do is really invest in them. And it's you know, what a story to be able to tell. You know, someone in my team has gone on to, you know, had this amazing idea, they've left my team, but now they're working on their own thing and they're flourishing, they are thriving in that because they're in that sweet spot. Like, that's a great story for me as a leader to be able to share. And so I think there's something around our leadership mindset. You know, we want, absolutely, we need to get the job done. We need to have our deliverables met. We need to ensure that we're thinking about growth for the organization. But I've never seen it work when you try to hold and pin someone down to a particular role, keep them small and expect them to grow. I just don't think that works. And so I think you have to, as a leader, be prepared to, you know, have people grow, because that's what people should be doing. And if they're not growing, they tend to regress. So think about people growing. What would the story be if they were to go on and flourish? And, you know, what can you do in terms of helping them, like I said, build that fluency about their craft, their work, but also around owning their career. You know, that's a responsibility I see myself as a leader, working with people, you know, to think about themselves beyond just the moment they have now, but actually what a really fruitful and encouraging career look like for them. So it is a tension, but I think, you know, it's a shift in mindset from being a manager who has your star players on the team to actually being a leader, to potentially allowing someone to create bigger and better teams elsewhere. So yeah, it is a tension.
You know, as someone coaching people in leadership, what do you find is the greatest barrier to that kind of thinking, and what can be done?
I mean, we hear the whole kind of like scarcity mindset, right? So it's like not thinking about growth. I think what can be done for leaders themselves is also just thinking about how they can nurture and create a culture that nurtures. So you might not have, you know, someone in your roster, for example, who can do exactly what the person, your star player, is doing. But if you shift your mindset to more of a nurturing, actually, how can I ensure that person, if they are going to move on, they are they're also able to share the skills and share the growth, share the experience and the learning with the people around them. So there has to be a shift in mindset. It is difficult because, you know, as leaders, it is a hard job. It's so hard. We've seen it with COVID. We see it just generally. It is a hard job to be a leader. You're under a lot of scrutiny and you need to deliver. But you know, really to help people move on and grow, having that sort of scarcity mindset, oh, that person's going to leave, we're not going to be able to do, you know, it doesn't allow for long-term thinking. It doesn't allow for, yeah, I guess, an abundance mindset, really, you know. So I think it's just helping leaders see that, you know, it can be a blind spot, because actually you have someone who is working with you and they're helping things run, and, you know, your system is running. You know, you can take your hands off of certain things, but actually it's how do you be a bit more intentional and be a bit more deliberate in helping people move on.
And I think that sort of speaks then to how do you then as a leader also model this and bring about a leadership team that holds to the same thinking, so that it actually becomes a culture within the organization. Have you worked in scenarios like that? And what have you seen work successfully for someone who would be thinking, I'd love to do that in my organization?
Yeah, no, I think one of my fondest memories of one of my you know, favorite managers, they really saw me. So, you know, in terms of coaching, for example, spotted that I kind of had a natural way about the way in which I business partner as a HR practitioner. So the way in which I'd hold space for people, but also listening, and, you know, just said, look, you'd be great at this. I mean, fast forward, you know, almost like 10, 11 years, like I'm doing this as part of this is my work. And so I think the ability to spot that and also encourage growth in others means that now, as a leader, I am doing the same thing, but also that community of practice where you're able to learn, and there's a curiosity about, you know, what the skills I may have. Like it kind of creates a safety to explore. And so, you know, if practically I'm saying to someone who is considering, oh, I want to shift my approach to enable people to grow, I think just look at your team, look at what do they have? What are the gifts that they have? Like Ashman's like gifts. What are the gifts that you have within your team? How can you allow people within your team to grow, nurture those gifts? And actually, how can that allow for a culture of people doing the same? You know, if you want people to stay, if you want people to do good work, this is the stuff that works. You know, we've seen it time and time again. If you are in the people and culture space, when people feel stifled, not invested in, they will leave. And so, you know, if you're considering whether you should do this or not, I think the proof is really in the pudding. You know, if you are willing to invest, you're willing to pour into your staff, you're willing, yes, it takes time, but you're willing to do that, you are more likely to keep people around than if you don't. So,
yeah. And I think the thing that oftentimes leaders don't realize is that when you, particularly if you have the misfortune of having to go through the change process and bring people to a place of redundancy, the people who remain begin looking for jobs or an out. And unfortunately, that isn't very, you know, one's not very conscious of that. But like you say, if there's this culture where people feel seen, feel heard, feel, you know, the organization is definitely showing care and concern and seeking our personal growth as entrepreneurs in our space, then you will have probably a lower turnover rate and therefore more longevity with those that you decide that, you know, would remain. Because I've seen organizations where just about everybody headed out the door, even the ones who were told, no, you've still got a contract here. So
yeah, it's kind of like that change in the tide kind of just, you know, everyone's antennas are up at this point and they're thinking about like, okay, what is next for me? And do I need to start planning? Do I need to start making changes? And so, you know, if you haven't really shored up your banks, if the foundations aren't great enough, you will lose people. And so actually for leaders, it's thinking, okay, this program of change is happening. You know, you yourself may not feel in control of that change, which is also a difficult position to be in. But what is it that you can potentially be doing to equip people beyond, you know, this moment right now and, you know, allow people to navigate it well, to leave well. You know, that's an important point.
Yeah. Let me go this way. I hadn't intended to do this, but I think what comes to mind is the whole thing around the change process. And I'd love for you to speak about, I want to call it a healthy change process. I have been in situations where I have observed organizations communicate at the very end before they send people home, or even just send emails around to everyone and not begin the communication way behind. Okay, I realize sometimes it's impossible to share earlier for whatever the reasons, but just speak a little bit into that before we move on.
Oh, and time and time again, you know, you see it, and as a people and culture person, HR person, you know, sometimes it is really difficult to be, you know, open about the level or the scale of change, but you have to map out the change early. You have to be clear around the points of engagement. People need to feel that they understand the change. They need space to grapple with it. They need space to ask questions, you know, they need to feel part of this change. And so, you know, it normally crashes when it's like cloak and dagger in a dark room and you're expecting people to be really excited. You know, you've got those early adopters, you've got different stages of change, right? And people play different roles within change. And so as a leader, if you want to land a change well, you really have to be cognizant of, you know, what is it that I'm expecting people to do with the information I'm giving them? You know, how can I help them kind of bring this into, you know, home and make sense for them? And you know, especially if it's redundancy and it's at the end and, you know, we're saying, oh, here you go, here's a surprise. Like, if you've been, whether you've been part of an organization for a long time, 2 minutes, it is a grief process. It's this unintentional thing that's happened to you. And so you have to kind of navigate that, you know, as anyone would do, grief, you know, there's the outcome, there's the anger around that, and then there's also kind of acceptance, and you're going through the stages. So a question to leaders is just, when you are landing change, be it cost saving or, you know, looking at your operating model, whatever it is, it's thinking about how this feels and how can people engage with this. And even if they're not ready to engage with it just yet, how can you create space for them to process and in turn grieve what's happening, grieve maybe the expectations they had for their role. You know, if this was so unexpected, think about you know, how people can kind of grieve you know, just the expectations of what they thought was going to happen, and let go of what's happening in the past. So that all of that takes time. So you know, in an ideal world you would have that time, but I couldn't urge, you know, strongly enough for leaders to really think about how are people going to see themselves in this change, and how are they going to make sense of it, rather than at the end it be sprung upon them and they're having to accept it. So it's a fight I know a lot of HR people, leaders, even some business leaders have, because sometimes it's not from them, it's, you know, from the top, or it's just a response to a geopolitical situation or work order in this case, you know, it's all these things that are happening. So communicate effectively, quickly, and be open as you possibly can about what's happening, I think is really important.
That's good. And unfortunately, many times the HR team as well may be facing redundancy and don't know anything about it. So they look like the enemy, but they're also, you know, on tippy toes. Anita raised something interesting. People worry that the organization will change so much when those leaving on redundancy go, that they decide they may as well leave too, as the organization will be feeling new and not necessarily better. And that's so true, Anita. And I've seen a situation where you then also run a program for those that remain to start well, because it's not business as usual. They're going to have to start afresh because, like you say, there is that sense of new. And again, Anita, yes, I think leaders underestimate the impact of even very small changes. That is so true. So true.
Absolutely. I agree. I think there are I love that about, you know, starting new and starting again, because, you know, that as any change, you know, you'd hope with a successful change program, people are informed, they understand what's happening, but there should be a change, right? It shouldn't enable people to start from where they left off. There should be something different as a part of this process, you would hope. And so there are these artifacts of change that are now taking place. There are things that should be new and different. So how you know, how are you helping people grapple with that? How are you equipping them to understand the new lay of the land, and for them to flourish? You can't just expect it to all just come together. It's you know, we see in some organizations that do transitions really well. They think about what's going to be different, and you know, maybe you are here as a leader, the engagement sessions that might be helpful for them. You know, it's the points of engagement to really process and grapple with this new world really that they're going to step into.
No, that's good. That's good. I want us to shift gears a little bit here to looking at, you know, through your work, what are some qualities or transferable skills that you've seen in employees that indicate that they could successfully transition into entrepreneurship? You know, we spoke about talent earlier, being considered as entrepreneurs within the organization. But, you know, what are some qualities that you may have seen or transferable skills that say, this person could successfully transition into entrepreneurship?
Yeah, I think, as I said at the start, you know, one's ability to spot, you know, potential negative, to spot an opportunity. So it might be a negative, it might be a circumstance. Ability to spot that, capitalize, or, you know, pivot on around that, and create an opportunity out of that is a really, really good skill. You know, it's not, some people may take the approach of like, oh, it's been done to me, you know, I feel a little bit powerless to it. It's a natural human response, but I think that someone who has honed the skill of, you know, thinking about what opportunity this presents, you know, that's a really, really good skill set. I think actually, yes, you'd be fantastic. You know, the ability to navigate the grey, you know, things aren't always black and white. I think as an entrepreneur, certainty isn't certain. So, you know, your ability to think about, you know, how am I going to navigate this? How am I going to communicate something that is grey to potentially a team? So the ability to inspire, you know, to think about a shared vision, to communicate, inspire a shared vision. That is a great skill. So your ability to kind of just pick up some of the nuances and articulate that into something that keeps people engaged, you know, potentially part of an offering is a great skill. I think someone, you know, people who are self-aware, so that's that sense of self-mastery. So you're committed to your own growth. You're committed to learning more about yourself. You know, emotional intelligence. These are all the kind of skills that enable you to think about what is it that you're bringing value to, right? What's the space you're trying to influence? And also that kind of self-discovery allows you to think about your own discipline, because, you know, those who are in this space know that it's hard, and you have to feel, discipline has to kick in even when you're not motivated. It's where the discipline kicks in. So I think there are a number of different transferable skills, and people are already doing this in the workplace. But like I said before, it's how are you, you know, how are we as leaders or as peers celebrating that, calling that out, naming it. So yeah, those are a few that come to mind.
Yeah, I love what you just said just now about, you know, peers or leaders calling that out so that you actually get to recognize, oh, I do have this, I do have this. But I think in the absence of that, it's really important to, like you say, be emotionally intelligent enough to recognize and say, you know what, I've been doing this well. I have a good core competency here that if I could just, you know, connect with what I want to do, what I love to do, then I will have a good thing going. And like you say, the need to be intentional with your self-growth because you don't have the corporate safety net anymore, then will serve you well. If an entrepreneur was wondering, if somebody rather was wondering, so you're a professional, you've been at this for say 5, 10 years, or even 3 years, and you're thinking, okay, you know what? The corporate landscape is just so uncertain. There's lots of restructuring going on and job uncertainty. There's lots of layoffs. What should I be doing? Should I be looking for another job, or should I go out on my own? What would you say to them?
I think my first point would be starting, what is it that you actually want? What's the life that you see for yourself?
Yeah.
Because it might well be circumstances don't permit for you to make that big step just yet. You know, it could be you've got a number of children in school, you know, private school, for example, whatever you have to, there's a lot of outgoings. You may not financially be in a position to take that big leap. But I would encourage anyone, even if you are, wherever you are, to really think about what is it I want from this life that I've been given, or, you know, I have in front of me. You know, how do I see my working week? You know, what do I have energy to do? Because, you know, especially if you've gone through a redundancy process, you know, you look for another role, but you're completely tired. You are fatigued by the change that's happened. And so mustering the energy to start something new is actually really tough. And so actually it might be that you just need to take some time to, you know, work on you, you know, engage the services of a coach, someone who can come alongside you and help you navigate what it is you're looking to do next. So I think it comes back to the goal. Like, what are you trying to achieve? What do you want out of your next career? Like, you know, in 12 months time, what would you want to be true? Thinking about the bigger questions and think about what actionable steps you can take. It might be one step that you like forward in one direction, but just taking that step, actually, how would you feel as a result of that? So yeah, I think it comes down to the individual around what is it they want, and start being clear about that.
Yeah. I like that. And in fact, the way I look at it is basically 3 steps. First one is actually to pause and take stock of where you're at.
Yes.
So this has happened. This is where I'm at. This is what's going on. These are the feelings I have. This is how I'm feeling or not feeling. And then from there, make time to really look after yourself. Because like you said earlier, one's experienced loss. So whether that looks like taking time away to just be quiet, then maybe seeking help from a coach, like you said, or a therapist, or just talking to a really good friend or even family. But I think it's important for people to realize you can't just jump from one thing into another. You really do need to take that pause. You then need to have that, a time to look after yourself. And then I think what you've said that's really significant also is you then coming away from this place of looking after yourself, getting help, make an informed decision on what you want. I can't tell you how many people I have asked, what do you want? And that's a really hard question. But I find it's easier to answer that when you've taken time to pause, when you've looked after yourself and sort of come to a place where you can even dare to dream again and say, actually, this is what I want. Because I think sometimes in life we're told what we should want and don't have the option of choosing what we want, either through life circumstances, as you mentioned, or whatever. So what do you want seems luxurious, seems almost, out of bounds.
I agree. I think, it's giving yourself permission. I love that, what you said, giving yourself permission to ask, what is it that I really want? And actually be attuned to your own needs. And if you've been in a position, a role, maybe outside of work, you are a constant giver in that sense, taking stock of what it is I actually want can feel really foreign to you. And so I love that, self-indulgent.
I love that's the correct phrase, Anita. Thank you. Self-indulgent. And it's not, it honestly is not. It's not. I'm also curious, with the technological advances and digital space we've come into, are you finding organizations looking to take on more specialized consultants over full-time hires?
I'm not seeing that. I think I am seeing the skill set, depending on the role, I'm seeing the skill set evolved. So managers and leaders are looking for people who are able to, understand that skill, digital AI, who are comfortable, who are forward thinking in that space. But I'm not seeing that itself replace the need for full-time hiring. I think there's a lot of introspection that's happening at this time around our processes, our systems. How do we make this accessible? How do we, utilize and leverage technology to simplify processes and help people, find it engaging? I think there's a lot of that happening. And we will always need people who are able to think and navigate that space, or at least willing to learn. So I think what I am seeing is, definitely an intentional, more deliberate, more deliberate way of thinking about who do I need just for not just for now, but for the future, and their skills as well. So yes, I think that is one thing I am seeing for sure.
Which speaks then to upskilling, which speaks to evolving to take on skill sets that I think would be complementary to one's role rather than, staying where you're at and hoping that you will survive the cut.
Yeah, and I think there's something around, just because we've always done this doesn't mean we're always
Yeah.
going to continue to do
Yeah.
this. And so, one of the challenges to me within HR is like we've always, HR has looked a certain way for a number of years.
Yeah.
Yes, there's AI, yes, there are a number of tools available, technology
Yeah.
is here, but what fundamentally about the discipline will need to shift for the future? And I
Yeah.
think for people in culture, people, for business leaders, if you're in a space or a particular sector which has looked very traditional for a number of years,
Yeah.
this stuff is coming, it's not even coming, it's here, we're in it. So it's
Yes.
just thinking about what does the future really look like?
Yeah.
How can I shift and adapt to that? How can I welcome this in?
Yeah.
As opposed to, be a resistor of it, because you
Yeah.
resist it, you get left behind. So, yeah, thinking about, your space within what is new.
Yeah. 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 And, when you speak of that, my mind goes to something as recent as remote working and the complexities around not having a legal framework for that, because the employment law, most of the employment laws don't even, what is that? Is that what does that look like? So there's a lot of catching up going on. And I think that for those people who have ever considered going out on their own, there is an opportunity to actually begin to court even some of the organizations they work within, that would be happy to probably contract you in your own business because you already have relationship. And because we now have, it doesn't have to be a full hire, it could be on contract a number of days a week, unlike the full-time that, has been more traditionally acceptable. You could navigate things like that. And I think these are some of the things that we need to begin to think about, particularly if you're working in a large organization, because I don't think restructuring is about to stop. If anything, I think we're going to see more and more of that happening. And like you said earlier, there's a mindset of thinking that, you know what, I'm an entrepreneur, even if I'm within an organization. And so this is an organization of entrepreneurs, and that shifts a few things. But having said that, so as an employee, oftentimes one will view redundancy as a setback and they don't see the opportunity there. How can leaders and organizations help reframe this experience to empower individuals for their next steps?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, redundancy is a setback, right? It is a setback. It's hard stuff. Like we said earlier, it's a grief. It's a loss. So there is grief that needs to happen. And I think leaders need to ensure that there is space to process that and navigate that. I think one thing that leaders, people in culture, people can be thinking about in terms of reframing isn't just thinking of, because like you said, it's not going to go away. Change isn't going to go away. Restructuring isn't going to go away. So how do you ready your staff, your employees, not only to not, about impending doom, but more around, how you can talk about your skills in a way that models an entrepreneurial mindset, right? I think you can also, one of the things that we see a lot in people and cultural spaces, we're going to look at our employee value proposition. So we're going to look at the stuff that makes people feel good about their organization and keeps them committed. And that's beyond, a pool table in the kitchen or pizza on Friday. You're actually thinking about, how do I help staff holistically? So if it's financial literacy, because that's a big thing, right? Once you are in the process, one of the biggest fears is, gosh, how am I going to survive? So if you're thinking about how we can ready staff not just for change, but just generally about bettering their lives
Yes.
financially. Can we get, additional experts? There are a number of companies out there that can come alongside and help people with, understanding finances. I've seen it recently with organizations looking at mortgages, right? If you are in a space or a city where, mortgage prices, things are going up and down, how can you help someone in your team understand what the options are available to them? So it's not just something you're thinking about at the end, but it's just holistically about how you get the best out of your life. So I think there are a number of things organizations can be doing actively to not just ready them for change, but think about their experience as a whole. I think specialist support such as career coaching is always a good idea, and that shouldn't just be accessible for your top stars. It's something you could think about offering for everyone, because if you are seeing people who are willing to take risks, who are thinking about their careers not just as the job, but broadly, they're going to show up and do their best, and in turn that's going to have an impact on the overall engagement, the overall culture you're trying to foster, and in turn, like, results, if that's really what we're looking for, or impact, if that's something you are, driving towards. So I think it has to be a really holistic view around the individual and what you can be doing quite early on, so that, yes, if there is a change program, I could say as an employee, actually, my employee has really done well in kind of equipping me and shaping me. I know what I can bring. I know my skills. I'm articulate about the way I talk about my craft. And so I have all of those things. I have X, Y, and Z to my disposal, and I can take that and do something with it. So that's a really important thing. So there are a number of things I think leaders can do to help reframe, but I think it's not just at the end, it's the people experience throughout. It's really thinking about, how do I ready people to think about the fact that they are in control of their career, and they can find opportunities for themselves that will help and be life-giving and thriving for them. So
and you know what you're generally saying, Grace, is really it all boils down to culture. The culture of an organization matters, and people need to feel cared for right from the get-go, not just at the tail end when you're shoving them out the door. And I love what Anita says, that a lot depends on how valued people felt before the change was on the cards, as to how easily they'll be able to see the change objectively, rather than a personal decision to get rid of them specifically. And I think to that point also is, when you collaborate, when you bring people into the conversation earlier, they feel that they've been involved and engaged, and therefore don't feel that it's a personal vendetta to get rid of them. But yeah, so it sounds like culture then becomes a really huge thing in terms of, how do you keep employees feeling that this organization sees them and cares for them. And so when the inevitable happens, well, we'll call it the inevitable for now, when this big chop happens, it wasn't targeted at them, and the leaders had been preparing them all along. Because listen, you're either going to retire at some stage or go get another job, but it doesn't mean you have to be there forever. So I think what I'm hearing a lot of is leadership matters, and leadership shapes the impact of redundancy in an organization. I'm also hearing culture is critical, and culture starts way before you ever had any restructuring go on. So this then becomes something which, when well nurtured and tended to, then you have employees that feel supported even when you go through a change process. At the same time, I do want to offer that, other than job placement, entrepreneurship is an option for those that feel it is time and the season for them to venture into entrepreneurship, and maybe that can be a consideration that is made. And I think, to one of the points you've raised, the ability of a leader to know and understand the team they have, would really help in calling out those skills and those things that, yes, you do this really well, and I could see you doing that even on your own. But it takes a very secure leader to be able to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's you're not thinking about just yourself. And I think, that is a hard thing to do, like we've talked about. So, it's really important. All that you've said, I completely, agree with. It's thinking about beyond just the now. And I would just add as well, there's a lot on leaders. There's a lot on leaders who help shape culture. People help shape culture. But there's also the individual recognizing that they have control over the career and the life that they want.
Yes.
So that could well be, yes, another job opportunity, job placement, but it could also be something that is on the other side of that might feel scary and big, but you have all these things to your disposal and you want to kind of go at it full hog. And so that is also within your control. Your leader isn't responsible for your career. HR isn't responsible for your career, and HR gets a bad rap because it's like, oh, HR said no. But actually it's how I can take control and do something with what I've got or the opportunities that are in front of me. How do I convert what is a challenge into something? And it's not just looking at this as like, oh yeah, it's all going to be great. It's going to be hard work. But individuals, yes, need to take control. And the minute you feel like you don't have control, that is, it really is hard in navigating the change. I think that's one thing I've seen with a number of clients, but also in this space as well, in HR, is that people feel out of control. And I think sometimes the notion of control is a bit of a misnomer, because how much are we in control of? But we are in control of our careers. That is something that is within our influence, and we are able to control. So like Anita said, it's finding that agency.
Yes. Really understanding that we have agency and we have choice, and it's up to us to make decisions, so that we don't feel things have been done to us, but we're taking charge. And that's a great posture to hold, but it takes courage to hold it. And I find the courage comes when you're clear on that initial question we asked: what do you want?
Absolutely. Yeah.
This is a great place to ask if anyone has any questions or any further comments you'd like to make. I mean, I'm happy for you to unmute yourself if you're able to, and just ask or say something that you've had. Anything? Anita, you're good. Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear me. As you can see, I'm in a train station. It's super
Yeah,
noisy.
well done, you. Well done.
But no, I just wanted to say, and hello, Grace. We need to have a chat. I'm sure it's been years. No, I just really enjoyed listening, and so many powerful things shared. And it's the sort of thing where you just think, if all this stuff is simple, by which I mean, it's powerful, it's really important, but it is not beyond people to be able to do this with just a great big dollop of common sense and human decency. And yet, we experience so many organisational changes where that appears to have been missed. And I just love the way you talked about it today, to distill it down into just really practical things, really accessible things. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Anita.
Thank you, Anita. Speaking of brilliant coaches, Anita is one of them. And I think it's someone, again, but you see that, right? You see how organizations time and time again fall into the same trappings, and it's just thinking. It can feel like common sense because it is common sense, but in the midst of big change, sometimes there's so many priorities as leaders you're trying to juggle, and those are some of the first things that go out the window, but keep on coming back to do same things. So
yeah. And I think there's something around that has to do with being human, you know, stopping and pausing and being human even through the process. Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. Super. Any other comment, any other question, anything before we end our time together? If not, maybe I'll just invite Grace to give us a last word as we head out. And Grace, could you also just share where people can get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll do that first. So you can get in touch with me through my website, which is navarregraceconsulting.com. We'll put that somewhere.
It's in the chat. We've just popped it into the chat.
Yeah, brilliant. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Grace Adelakun, but you can also follow Navarre Grace Consulting and keep up to date with what's happening, and information that I might be bringing out as well soon. So would love to connect. I guess in final word, I think you know, redundancy or this change doesn't have to be the end of you as an individual if you're navigating that. And I recognize there's a lot happening in the world at the moment, and it's I think I was saying, you know, I've never seen on LinkedIn so many like open to work things for various reasons. There's a lot happening, but there is hope. You know, you can find that thing that really energizes you. That might be in an organization, it might be you know, but there's also, you know, potentially a pathway for you to do the thing that you love, maybe the idea that you really, you know, it's been burning inside for a while. Ask the questions, get the data, you know, get the feedback, you know, think about your career beyond just this moment and more of the life you want to live. And yeah, often there are amazing things on the other side of you know, if it's fear or something feels very lofty. So I think, you know, get the support, you know, speak to amazing coaches and people who can, you know, walk alongside you. But you kick yourself if you don't do it sometimes. So yeah, I think that's the final word I say is it's not easy, but it can be worth it.
Yes, indeed, indeed. Thank you, Grace, for a brilliant conversation. And we're going to pop in my website and LinkedIn link there in case anyone wants to be in touch. But no, thank you for joining us, and I hope you've got some nuggets. We will be sharing this with you so you can share with others who you feel would find this insightful. So again, thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.